Revelation chapter 20. I keep waiting on Revelation to get easier. I thought when I hit chapter 4 that it would get a little tough, but I haven't seen an easy chapter yet since chapter 4. And it's the problem is there are so many different ideas, and trying to weed through the different thoughts. As a matter of fact, we're talking about the millennium today. Well, as you would expect, there's disagreement on the millennium. And here are three main views. Some people say there's four, but they take one of them and split it into two. You got amillennialism, and I kind of covered those in the video, but not that many people got the link to the video. And these folks do not believe in a literal 1,000 years. This is mostly your Calvinistic folks who believe this way. And there's post-millennial folks that they believe that that Christ returns after what's called this golden age. And they thought the golden age was in the late 1800s and the early 1900s because there were a lot of missionaries going out, a lot of people were getting saved, and it was looking like this is the golden age. And then came the Great War, WW1, and then came WW2, and then came the Korean War and the Vietnam War and the Gulf War, and there aren't as many post-millennialists as there used to be. They've kind of done away with that. Now I'm teaching from the premillennial view, which says that the Bible says it's 1,000 years, and it comes after the tribulation period. And so I kind of believe it's 1,000 years that come after the tribulation period. And so that's the view I'm taking. Now, that is, believe it or not, this may be a shock, that is the minority view. The majority view is the amillennial. And the reason is people worship Augustine. And I know if you're more intellectual, you say Augustine. But have you ever heard anybody say, I'm taking my vacation in St. Augustine? No. They go to St. Augustine. So I'm going with that one. And Augustine was influenced by Origen. Origen lived around the 200, the AD 200s. And Origen was described as, by a historian I heard, he was brilliant. And he asked the right questions, but he got the wrong answers. So Origen believed that the Bible was more allegorical, more symbolic. And Augustine, who lived around the 400s, picked up on that. And so therefore, the Catholic Church picked up on more amillennial thought. And when the Reformers, when the Reformers had what you call the Protestant Reformation, they carried that on in. So your mainline churches, like Lutheran, Episcopal, those that came out of the Reformation, straight out of the Reformation, were all amillennial. And most churches today are amillennial. The ones that aren't, and of course Baptists are divided up. There's, Baptists never agree on anything. So, but I think most Baptists are premillennial. Your Pentecostals are premillennial. Your Independents are more premillennial. So that's why there's this confusion of thought on this thing. So let's look at Revelation chapter 20. Verse 1. And I saw an angel coming down out of heaven, having the key to the abyss, and holding in his hand a great chain. He seized the dragon, that ancient serpent, who is the devil, or Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. He threw him into the abyss, and locked and sealed it over, to keep him from deceiving the nations anymore until the 1,000 years were ended. After that, he must be set free for a short time. Guess who's got the key now? Back in chapter 9, Satan had the key to the abyss. You remember? He opened it up and out came the Antichrist and some other nasty folks too. And now I guess somebody took it away from him because he doesn't have the key anymore in this time. So he's locked up for 1,000 years. And so where did we get the word millennium? Well, it doesn't come from the Greek. It comes from Latin. And so he's going to be locked up for 1,000 years. And y'all remember Flip Wilson? You remember? Yeah, he used to say, the devil made me do it. Well, during this 1,000 years, then you can't say that because he's locked up. So now then, I may step on a toe or two here, but there are a lot of folks out here, it's mostly from the Pentecostal side, they talk about binding Satan. You ever heard anybody say that? Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure we can bind Satan. He's running pretty quick. Now God's got him on a leash. So Satan can't just do everything he wants to do. But as far as us binding Satan, it took an angel to bind Satan to lock him up. So here are some verses that show you Satan is more powerful than we are in ourselves. Of course, with Christ is more powerful. But I want you to look at these verses just to show you how powerful Satan is. This is from 2 Corinthians 4. The God of this age, he's called the God of this age. I guess he is, because a lot of people worship him, don't they? So he is a God with a small g. The God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers so that they cannot see the light of the gospel that displays the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. Here's another one in Ephesians chapter 2. As for you, you were dead in your trespasses and your transgressions and sins, in which you used to live when you followed the ways of this world and of the ruler of the kingdom of the air. That's talking about Satan here. The spirit who is now at work in those who are disobedient. So he's the ruler. He's a ruler of a kingdom. And that's this thing called the world that we live in. But we're not of, okay? Because the word church is ecclesia, and it means called out of. So we have been called out of the world. So it's like that song, "This world is not my home, I'm just a passing through." And that's what we're doing. Here's another one, 1 Peter chapter 5. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know that the family of believers throughout the world is undergoing the same kind of sufferings. And I think I read that the 20th century more Christians were killed and died than any other time. 1 John chapter 5, we know that we are children of God and that the whole world is under the control of the evil one. Satan is powerful. So instead of binding Satan, what we're told here in James is to resist him. James chapter 4, submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Come near to God and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. So watch the screens a minute. Here's a picture. Here's a person. And you see that snake? Well, that's Satan. And then what symbol do you use for God? So I use love, a heart, okay? So here's what happens. He resists the devil, and he takes a step toward God, and God moves closer to him. And he goes again close to God, and God moves. Every time we take a step to God, He's taking a step toward us to be closer. And look what happens. Oh, the devil's gone. He fled. So that's what those verses say. I used the illustration on this one time with Bill and Beverly Fleming. Of course, I made Beverly God, and I made Bill the devil when I did it. but I didn't want us all walking around up here with all this COVID floating around. Okay, Revelation 20, verse 4. And I saw thrones on which were seated those who had been given authority to judge. And I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony about Jesus. I don't know about you, but years ago, when I would read this verse, I would think, oh, but that happened a long time ago. Folks got beheaded. And then along came ISIS. Yeah. And it's probably happening in Afghanistan right now. So these aren't folks from way back necessarily. These are folks from today. And I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony about Jesus and because of the word of God. They had not worshipped the beast or its image and had not received its mark on their foreheads or their hands. They came to life and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. The rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy are those who share in the first resurrection. The second death has no power over them, but they will be priests of God and of Christ and will reign with him 1,000 years. Now next week we're going to see the great white throne, and we're going to see this second death, and we're going to see about the lake of fire and all that. And if you think there's not some confusion over judgments, how many are there? Are there one? Are there two? Are there three? I'll let you know next week because I hadn't figured it out yet myself. So who are these on these thrones? Well, we know it's the church is there, for sure. But also, I think Old Testament saints, that would be people called Israel. Now, you remember what Paul said in Romans chapter 9. He says, not all Israel is Israel. And that's a confusing sounding, that may be in chapter 10, I'm not sure. But what he's saying is there's Israel and then there's Israel. And the Israel that Paul's talking about are those who are actual believers. Because just because you're an Israelite doesn't mean you are part of spiritual Israel. So I think they're going to be on the thrones too. And I think those who were martyred and saved during the tribulation period will also be on these thrones. And it makes me wonder, this thing about beheading. A lot of people want to point to the Catholic Church as being maybe the dominant church in that the Antichrist has. I haven't heard anybody say maybe it's Islam. Maybe Islam is part of that new, because some of these beheadings take place in the tribulation period. So let's not leave them out of the picture. I don't think the Catholic Church itself is part of this myself. I don't think the Pope is the Antichrist, okay? But these verses speak about the first resurrection. And I think the first resurrection is really three different groups of resurrections, and it's called the first resurrection. When Christ died on the cross, there was a resurrection. There were people, some Old Testament saints walking around, talking. They were resurrected. And then, of course, there's what we call the rapture. That would be part of the first resurrection. And then there's the resurrection of those who were believers, who died. And I think the first resurrection is just believers. There's going to be a second resurrection of all the dead. And I think that's going to be the second resurrection. You do not want to be in the second resurrection. Okay, you want to be in the first resurrection. Verse 7. When the 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out and deceive the nations in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, and to gather them for battle. In number, they are like the sand of the seashore. They marched across the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of God's people, the city he loves. But fire came down from heaven and devoured them, and the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of burning sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet had been thrown. They will be tormented day and night forever and ever. Well, Satan's going to end up with his buddies in this lake of fire, okay? And I think of a better place. For some reason, our culture, we think of Satan as being kind of the boss of hell, like he's in charge. No, he's going to be a prisoner. He is not the boss of hell. God is the boss of hell. So Satan is going to wind up in a place where he deserves. There's also some thoughts among some Christians. Well, I was going to cover this next week. Annihilation, and there's really nothing in the Bible that backs that up. Okay, also, this just shows that Satan is what I call bad to the bone, if he had bones. I don't know if he has bones. But he was locked up for 1,000 years. They let him out. He's back to the same old tricks that he was up to. And now who is in this millennium? Who are the people in this millennium? They're the people that survived the tribulation. And I think some of them are unsaved and some of them are saved. Now some say only the saved survived it. I don't know that. Some people want to say that speaking of judgments, you know the place where you got the sheep and the goats in Matthew 25? Now some say that happens right here, and that the sheep are the are those that survived the tribulation but followed Christ, and the goats are the ones who didn't. Not sure about that one. So, these verses talk about the four corners of the earth. Now someone may say, well, you people believe the earth is flat. But the four corners of the earth is just an expression of everywhere. It's like you could say north, south, east, and west. You could say that the same way. So that's about the four corners that we read. And then, of course, John had to throw in Gog and Magog. Now, who is Gog and Magog, and why did he put it here? If you saw the video, was it last week? Week before last, of Armageddon. I went into Ezekiel 38, and there's this big battle, and some of the people in there were Gog and Magog. Gog is a leader. It's not a place. Magog is the place that Gog is over. And the area is Russia. And also part of what you call the stands, Turkestan, or Islamistan, and Afghanistan is part of Magog. And this battle, we think, takes place right before the tribulation, and God destroys them real quick. I don't think the Gog and Magog thing is part of Armageddon. I think it's a separate battle, and it's another quick battle. God doesn't have to stretch things out too much on these battles. And so Gog and Magog was a crushing defeat. And it could be that in these latter days that the term Gog and Magog might be the same way that we use the term Waterloo. And Because we talk about Waterloo, everybody knows that it's a big crushing defeat that Napoleon suffered. And so Gog and Magog may be referring back to this battle, which hadn't taken place yet, but it's in the past here. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm glad y'all figured it out. Uh-oh. Okay. You have a point in history in the future where you have this battle and Gog and Magog are involved in it. And it's before the tribulation or right at the beginning, because Israel felt safe during this battle before it happened. So this is taking place in the millennium after the Gog and Magog battle. So it may be that this is looking back at Gog and Magog as just the term for a crushing defeat. I hope that's clear as mud. I'm here to tell you, this is some of the toughest stuff I've ever wrestled with. My life has been consumed with the book of Revelation for the past few months. All right, let's see. So Satan is going to have his Gog and Magog moment. After the end of the millennium, he's destroyed. And this just goes to show you, isn't it weird? These people have been living under perfect rule by Christ for 1,000 years, and they still followed Satan when he was let loose. Which just goes to show you that some folks just are not going to follow Christ, even under perfect situations, perfect peace. Now, what's life like? What was life like in the millennium? Well, we have to go back into the Old Testament to find out. And Isaiah chapter 11. I'm going to flash on the screen. It's in 3 different parts because it's long. A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. Now, who is Jesse? Who?
David's father.
David's father, yeah. And so we're talking about Christ here, who was in the lineage of David, actually through Mary, not necessarily Joseph. A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him. The Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of the knowledge and fear of the Lord, and he will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes, or decide by what he hears with his ears, but with righteousness he will judge the needy. With justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. With the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Righteousness will be his belt, and faithfulness the sash around his waist. And here, I forgot to change it. Here's the verses I like. The wolf will live with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with the goat. The calf and the lion and the yearling together. And a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear. Their young will lie down together. Let's see, okay. And the lion will eat straw like the ox. They won't be eating, the lion won't be eating people, other animals or people. The infant will play near the cobra's den. The young child will put his hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. It's going to be a time of perfect peace. Here's another one, Isaiah 65. Never again will there be in it an infant who lives but a few days, or an old man who does not live out his years. The one who dies at 100 will be thought a mere child. The one who fails to reach 100 will be considered accursed. So people are going to live longer. There won't be infants dying off. It's going to be a really nice time. Now, mankind has attempted to create utopias over the years, and they never work, because what they fail to take into consideration is the sinfulness of mankind. And so utopia, there cannot be a utopia here on earth. But this is finally a utopia here on earth. Now, Paul has some interesting scriptures in Romans chapter 8. Oh, here's a picture. It's a weird looking picture, but it shows children there playing with animals. And I don't know what the deal is with the Pilgrims and the Indians over there, but but it was an interesting looking picture anyhow. I guess the Pilgrims and I thought they got along okay to begin with. I mean, they had Thanksgiving. So I was sitting in my yard one day, and I was thinking, oh, it's such a nice, peaceful day. And then I started thinking, is it really? There are a little field mouse crawling around out there somewhere, and there's a snake looking for it to eat it, or a hawk flying to eat it. There are bugs fighting each other. There are birds eating the bugs. It's not that peaceful. And creation, look at these verses in Romans chapter 8. For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For creation is subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present age. Not only so, we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption to sonship, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved, but hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes for what they already have? So creation has been living through this thing. See, in the Garden of Eden, the animals ate plants. They didn't eat each other. And then we had the fall, and everything went kind of crazy. Animals started eating each other. Matter of fact, you remember what God did? He made clothing for Adam and Eve, because the fig leaves weren't going to work too good when they got out of the garden and got cold. He gave them skins of animals. So creation itself, it's hard to imagine, has been groaning for this day. I think for this day when there's peace again, and the animals don't eat each other, and people aren't eating each other or killing each other or eating the animals. Although I will miss barbecue. But so finally there is peace on earth and goodwill toward men in this millennium time. But this isn't heaven. Heaven is still yet to come. And with all this goodness, there's going to be a war. It's going to be short and sweet. God's going to take care of it for us. Satan will join his buddies. And there's going to be a judgment day coming, but not for the believers. This thing called the Great White Throne Judgment. And you have to tune in next week to hear about that, because that's a whole nother lesson by itself.